Why do some people seem to be born condemned to pain? Why do certain human beings face, from an early age, irreparable losses, incurable diseases, rejection, abandonment, tragedies that repeat themselves like a cruel cycle? Is this the result of chance, divine punishment, or is there a deeper explanation that most people still refuse to see? The truth is that human suffering has roots far older than we imagine, and the higher spirits through Allan Kardec revealed what lies behind lives marked by pain. Revelations that shock, that liberate, and above all explain what reason alone has never been able to comprehend. Few have the courage to face the true cause of suffering, because it requires looking beyond what the eyes can see. It requires questioning everything we've been taught about justice, destiny, luck, and merit. But those who understand these truths gain something few ever achieve: peace amidst pain, and even more, the power to transform their own lives. In this video, you will understand what is hidden behind the most suffering souls on earth. You will discover why some people seem to carry such heavy burdens, and what is the true role of suffering in spiritual evolution. The answers are not simple, but they are real, and they can change the way you see your own existence. Watch until the end. There is something in this content that the world needs to hear, but only awakened hearts will be able to understand. Throughout centuries of observation and study of spiritual phenomena, Allan Kardec and the higher spirits revealed a reality that intrigues, unsettles, and at the same time explains many of the pains we face on this earthly plane. Yes, there is a deep mystery behind the souls that seem to be drawn from the cradle to tortuous paths. People who, even when surrounded by good intentions, cannot escape destructive relationships, recurring tragedies, or illnesses that arise without apparent reason. But what lies behind this sequence of events that so often seem unjust to human eyes? The answer lies in what spirituality calls spiritual marks. These marks are not visible to the physical eyes, but are imprinted subtly and definitively on the perispirit, the fluidic body that surrounds the spirit and connects it to matter. They are like vibrational codes inherited from past experiences, silent records of actions, feelings, omissions, and choices from other incarnations. According to the mediumistic communications studied by Kardec, there are spirits who reincarnate already programmed to face certain pains. This programming is not a condemnation, nor an arbitrary punishment. It is a meticulous plan, carried out in the spiritual realm, in which the spirit itself, guided by higher mentors, chooses the trials it will face. The goal is one: to grow, evolve, repair, transform. And in this process, some souls become deeply marked, carrying within them the seeds of future difficult experiences. These marks function like a kind of spiritual magnetism. They attract situations that, at first glance, may seem random, but in reality were carefully aligned with that spirit's needs. The spirit who betrayed may live the pain of betrayal. The one who caused emotional suffering to others may face abandonment or loneliness in order to understand in their own skin what they once inflicted, not as punishment, but as learning. There are also those who don't understand why they always attract the same type of destructive relationship, the same pattern of pain. This is not a coincidence. These are programs born from invisible marks that, if not understood and re-signified, will continue to manifest life after life until the lesson is fully absorbed. Many times these marks are mistaken for bad luck, when in truth they are deep mechanisms of karmic repair, silent but powerful. However, it is important to understand that these souls are not abandoned, nor are they victims of chance. They are on a journey, and it is precisely this understanding that transforms despair into strength and pain into wisdom. Because when the incarnated spirit recognizes that there is a purpose behind painful experiences, it stops fighting life and starts cooperating with it. The spiritual mark is not an eternal sentence. It can be re-signified through conscious choices, moral elevation, inner transformation. But as long as there is no awareness, pain will continue to be the most effective resource that spiritual life uses to awaken those who still sleep within themselves. And it is in this scenario of deep marks and invisible programming that one of the most enigmatic and powerful laws of the spiritual universe emerges. A law that acts with absolute precision, like a sacred accounting of the soul. As we continue to understand spiritual marks, it becomes inevitable to dive into one of the most delicate and fair mechanisms of creation, the law of cause and effect. Little understood in its depth, it operates in silence, but with a precision no human justice could ever achieve. And it is through it that karmic reparation manifests itself, building bridges between past and present, between who we were and who we are becoming. Allan Kardec, when compiling the responses of the higher spirits, realized that nothing in life happens by chance. Every pain, every joy, every encounter, every loss, all has its origin in choices made before, and those choices, when filled with selfishness, pride, omission, or cruelty, generate spiritual consequences that extend beyond a single existence. This subtle, and at the same time rigorous accounting functions like mathematics of the soul. If in a past life a spirit used their power to harm, humiliate, or destroy, in this life they may return under conditions of extreme humility, subjected to situations that make them feel, in their own existence, the weight of the pain they once caused. This is not punishment, it is rebalancing. The soul learns not just through reason, but mainly through lived experience. Many spirits, upon returning to the spiritual plane after physical death, become aware of the imbalances they caused. And faced with that raw truth, it is not mentors or cosmic judges who impose the pain of reparation. It is the spirit itself, moved by a natural impulse of evolution and repentance, that offers to go through certain trials. They recognize that they cannot ascend while carrying unpaid debts, and so they become their own collector. This is one of the most impactful aspects of this law. The spirit is not forced to suffer. It accepts suffering as a healing tool. That is why so many people go through lives of intense hardship from childhood. Incurable diseases, early losses, abandonment, violence. Many of these trials were previously accepted as part of a greater plan that aims not at suffering for suffering's sake, but at the spirit's liberation from old bonds. Sometimes the soul incarnates into families that reflect exactly what it needs to experience in order to dissolve old mistakes. And even the most toxic or distant family bonds are part of this vast web of learning. What wounds today may be the very instrument that will liberate tomorrow. Pain, when understood from this perspective, gains a new dimension. It ceases to be unjust and becomes just. It ceases to be random and becomes logical. And even though the human heart resists this understanding in moments of despair, it is within that understanding that the key to true transformation lies. Because the spirit who understands their own karmic reparation begins to live with more awareness, more responsibility, and most importantly, with more serenity in the face of trials. But the most impressive thing is that not all who suffer are paying debts from the past. There are those who choose to dive into suffering for even deeper reasons, for purposes that go beyond reparation. Not every soul that suffers is paying for past mistakes. There are those who walk the earth surrounded by pains that do not belong to their individual past, but to higher purposes. Spirits who, even free from heavy karmic debts, volunteer to incarnate in scenarios of profound hardship. These are the so-called missionaries of suffering. Even before they are born, these souls already know what they will face. They are not pushed by guilt, nor forced by spiritual imposition. They asked. They asked to carry burdens, to cross emotional deserts, to live the pain of those who would not be able to walk alone. They are spirits who understood, in higher dimensions, that pain, when lived with awareness and resignation, can illuminate not only oneself, but also those around them. Among these chosen ones are people who appear ordinary to the world. They are born into humble families, face abandonment, illness, and often carry physical or mental marks from childhood. They live without knowing many times that they are fulfilling a mission of light in the midst of darkness. Pain accompanies them, but it does not destroy them. On the contrary, it shapes within them a rare inner strength, silent, invisible to the hurried eyes of society. Many of these spirits are instruments of transformation within dysfunctional family structures, where love needs to be awakened. They carry in their energy a frequency that, although not rationally understood, provokes deep changes around them. They are children born with severe limitations who, even so, radiate an inexplicable peace. Or mothers who face devastating losses, yet remain standing, offering comfort to other wounded hearts. It's important to understand that not all missionaries perform grand visible deeds. Some will never be recognized, never remembered by crowds, but their silent actions behind the scenes of life carry immense spiritual weight. Allan Kardec, in studying these spirits on a mission, pointed out that they are not on earth by chance. They were prepared and accepted in higher realms to face nearly impossible trials in order to accelerate their own elevation, or to collectively advance entire groups. There are also those who devote themselves to social, spiritual, or humanitarian causes, and who face deep resistance, slander, and abandonment. They are martyrs of light, planting seeds in arid soil, often without reaping the fruit. But they do so with the awareness that the harvest will come. Not in this life, perhaps, but it will come, because divine law is perfect in its rewards. And amid this selfless surrender, pain still remains. But not as punishment. It is the sign that the mission is underway. And the greater the resistance, the greater the strength required. That's why many of these souls live experiences that at first glance seem cruel. But in truth, they are pacts made by the souls themselves, as part of a much greater plan, of which we can only see the surface. However, not all suffering stems from missions or past debts. There are external forces, often invisible, that take advantage of emotional and spiritual vulnerabilities in the incarnated to feed their own existence. And it is at this point that the influence of spiritual obsessors begins to unfold silently, yet devastatingly. While some souls walk under the weight of spiritual debts or take on elevated missions amidst pain, others face a silent, persistent, and often misunderstood kind of suffering: spiritual obsession. Allan Kardec, in systematizing Spiritist knowledge, dedicated significant attention to this phenomenon, classifying it as one of the greatest causes of disturbance in the lives of the incarnated. And indeed, obsession is one of the most complex and dangerous mechanisms operating between the visible and invisible worlds. The obsessing spirit is not a demonic entity or something outside the system of divine justice. In most cases, it is a disincarnate soul still attached to hatred, resentment, or desires for revenge. It may be someone who was wronged by the person in another incarnation, or even in this current life. And having not found the path of forgiveness or evolution, they choose to energetically attach to the incarnated person, draining their strength and generating continuous suffering with no apparent cause. These obsessors feed on the negative vibrations they manage to stir in their victims. They are like parasites of the spiritual plane, attaching themselves to the person's vibrational field and remaining there, encouraging destructive thoughts, emotional imbalances, addictions, and even physical illnesses. Often these spirits are not even fully aware of what they are doing. They are so dominated by their own pain and confusion that they believe they are simply responding to an old injustice. Obsession can begin subtly: constant sadness, an inexplicable sense of fatigue, a loss of enthusiasm for life. Then it progresses to more severe conditions: panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, outbursts of anger, social isolation. It's not uncommon for traditional medicine to fail in properly diagnosing these symptoms, as their roots lie not just in the body or the mind, but in the spirit. It is essential to understand that the obsessing spirit only approaches and attaches itself when it finds an opening. And this opening often lies in unhealed emotional wounds, quietly nurtured pride, harbored resentments, or unresolved guilt. The more unbalanced a person's inner life is, the more susceptible they are to these spiritual attacks. Spiritism teaches that it's not enough to repel the obsessor. It is necessary to transform oneself. It's not about fighting the lower spirit with hatred or fear, but with light. Moral change, sincere prayer, and constant vigilance over one's thoughts and actions are the most powerful weapons against obsession, because no spirit of darkness can remain where the light of love, forgiveness, and inner reform is continuously present. Many times the obsessor is an old adversary crying out for recognition and reconciliation, and when the victim understands this and begins to emanate vibrations of compassion and understanding, a silent healing begins to take place in both parties. Obsession then becomes an opportunity for mutual redemption. But there are even deeper cases in which the incarnated spirit, even after having overcome past debts, conquered obsessors, and fulfilled arduous missions, decides to take one final step, a brave and painful step toward their definitive liberation. And that is when the highest, most silent, and most respectable trial within the human spiritual journey arises. Among the thousands of spirits who reincarnate every day, there are those who walk the earth in silence, almost invisible, carrying pains that defy any logical explanation. They are ancient souls, spirits who have already passed through the densest phases of moral learning, who have purified themselves through many incarnations, who have awakened to the highest values of spiritual life. And yet, they choose to return to the flesh under extremely harsh conditions. Why? The answer lies in a kind of final test, a last trial, not because they need to pay for anything, but because they wish to free themselves completely from any lingering traces of pride, vanity, rebellion, or attachment to matter. It is a final purification, a choice made consciously and serenely. Allan Kardec and the spirits who communicated with him explained that for certain spirits in an advanced state of evolution, there still remain small imperfections to be refined. And for this they submit themselves to lives of extreme suffering. These spirits no longer need glory or recognition. They allow themselves to be shaped by the pains that come, not as victims of fate, but as silent sages of the soul. They reincarnate, often in sickly bodies, in dysfunctional families, in contexts of material, social, or emotional poverty. Their lives seem marked by defeat, failure, or abandonment. In the world's eyes, they are just one more among many. But in the spiritual dimension, they are fulfilling tasks that few would have the strength to accept. And not rarely, these advanced souls, even while immersed in pain, radiate a different kind of presence. They have a gaze that consoles, a silence that speaks, a patience that calms. They endure humiliation with dignity, and even in the face of adversity, continue to be a source of peace to those around them. They are lights extinguished on the outside, but glowing within. These spirits, by facing suffering without revolt or despair, deeply touch those around them. They do not teach with words, but with example, and every tear they shed in the spiritual plane represents a silent victory. One more step toward true freedom, the liberation from the reincarnation cycle. When they complete this trial, these spirits no longer need to return to Earth. They have no more debts to settle, no more missions to fulfill in the physical realm. They become full collaborators of the higher spiritual planes, actively participating in the moral guidance of humanity. And even after this liberation, they continue to work, not out of obligation, but out of love. That is the final destiny of all of us. A path built step by step, pain by pain, choice by choice. Because pain, when understood in its spiritual dimension, ceases to be a burden and becomes a tool. It no longer oppresses us. It reveals who we are and who we can become. From now on, every challenge that arises can be faced with a new perspective, no longer as punishment, but as an instrument of awakening. Because when pain is understood, it becomes a teacher. And when it is faced with faith and awareness, it becomes liberating. If this video touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Like, comment below, which part moved you the most? Which pain now makes more sense to you? And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because together, we will continue diving into the spiritual truths the world has yet to learn to hear. You are not alone, and you never were.